All right, what's up, boxing fans? It's Aztec 101. So, in this video, I'm going to take you guys back in time and tell you about a boxer that you have not heard of before. I can almost guarantee that most of you do not know who I'm talking about. This boxer has a very interesting story, and we're going to do a complete breakdown. We're going to talk about not just his boxing career, but life before and after boxing. Okay. Um, his story is super interesting because he boxed during one of boxing's golden era and then also was a political activist during the civil rights movement. I feel like his story has been brushed under the rug and it needs to be highlighted. So I'm hoping I do a good job. This is my first time doing a video like this. Bear with me. I wrote down a lot of notes and I'm hoping that I can deliver this in a way where I don't sound like I'm reading a Wikipedia page. Okay. Leave a comment if you like this kind of content. Let me know if there's other fighters you want me to break down. Okay. But the guy that I'm about to talk about has everything in his story, everything from poverty to boxing during one of boxing's golden era to political activism during the civil rights movement to FBI investigation to his organization having shootouts with police. What the fuck? There's so much going on. It's an interesting story. And the guy that I'm about to talk about, his name is Rodolfo Corky Gonzales. Instead of calling him by his full name, Rodolfo Corky Gonzales, from here on out, I'm going to be using his nickname, Corky. And I'll explain how he gets his nickname in a little bit. But Corky was born in 1928 in Denver, Colorado. His parents, Federico and Indalecia Gonzalez, had 8 children. Corky was the youngest. Now, unfortunately, when he was 2 years old, his mother passed away. And this was a huge blow to the family. Because if you think about it, by the time he was 2 years old, that's 1930. And that's a year into the Great Depression. So during the Great Depression, everybody was fucked. Everybody. And poverty struck a lot of families if they weren't already deep in it. The funny thing is that some of Corky's siblings say that they really didn't feel the Great Depression because they were so poor that it didn't really affect them anyways. So some families were already in poverty before the Great Depression. They happened to be one of them. The dad had to take care of 8 kids by himself. And that was not an easy task. This meant that everybody had to, try to do their best to bring in what they can. Everybody worked. The kids worked. The dad worked. Um, they were field workers. Corky worked the fields and went to school at the same time, and he managed to do both. Um, Sometimes they would move to New Mexico, depending on on the seasons. They would have to go to school wherever they worked. So they would go to school in New Mexico, go to school in Colorado, move back and forth depending on where they could find work. And even though they worked a lot and they worked hard, it seemed like the dad focused a lot on education. He tried his best to provide him some kind of education from home. So that's reflected in, the dad teaching him about Mexican history, teaching him about how the Spanish colonized Mexico, how Mexico eventually fought for their independence, the revolutions and the civil wars that came after that. He tried his best to give him the information he had, and pass it down to Corky. Corky graduated high school at 16. All right, he worked and graduated high school at 16 in 1944. All right. Now, in this next section, I'm going to talk about, because what happens next is his boxing career starts, right? But before I go into his boxing career, I really want to set the stage and let you guys know what was happening around that time. This will help you understand Corky as an individual, not just a boxer. Okay? All right, so remember, we're going back 20 years from when Corky graduated high school in 1944. Now, in this time, segregation was in full effect. It was being practiced in every state differently. But pretty much your race dictated everything you did. It dictated where your kids could go to school, where you could live, where you could eat, shit, piss. Absolutely everything was dictated by your race. Now, World War II does not end until a year after he graduates high school in 1944. World War II ends in 1945. But to give you a perspective of where we're at within the war, the year he graduates is the same year as D-Day. D-Day was also in 1944. Okay, 1943 was the Zoot Suit riots. For those of you who don't know, this was less of a riot and more of mob violence from U.S. sailors on Mexican American citizens. Okay, and you guys can look into it. It's sad and it's interesting at the same time, but yeah, most of the people arrested, 99% of them. I don't think any sailor was arrested, but they were all Mexican. Some African Americans were arrested too, and they were also um, uh, they were a victim of the mob violence from the sailors. Look into it. It's an important part of history. Very interesting. 1942 was a bracero program, right? Now the bracero program was intended to bring manual labor workers from Mexico to help with farming and railroad, right? Apparently, there was a shortage of workers. Now, it's interesting. I'm going to explain why there was a shortage of workers. Okay. Very, it's all connected. Um, the Great Depression goes from 1929 to 1939, and it fucks everybody up. All right. But during the Great Depression, I don't know if you remember earlier in this video, I said that during the Great Depression, Mexicans had to deal with just an element of the Great Depression that was different and unique to Mexican Americans. Um, During the Great Depression, between 1929 and 1936, was the Mexican Repatriation Act, which was pretty much just a massive deportation act. And so this explains why in 1942 the bracero program they have to bring in Mexicans. It's because in 19 between 1929 and 1936 they deported too many Mexicans. Actually, California passed a bill, a my bad bill. Pretty much, it's an official apology where they're they're acknowledging some really fucked up shit. In Section B, 400,000 citizens in California alone were deported. Okay? 400,000 US born citizens in California alone. Okay? Section C, 2 million people, 1.2 of who were US born, were deported. So that's about 60% of the people that were deported during the Mexican Repatriation Act were US citizens. So in 1929, LULAC, the League of United Latin American Citizens, was formed. Between 1910 and 1920, more than 5,000 Mexicans were lynched. And just to give you guys an example of some of the fuckery that Mexicans had to deal with, in 1918, Provenir Massacre. I don't know if you guys heard of this, but this is a fucked up situation. Texas Rangers and ranch owners executed 15 boys and adults, also burned down the town, all because they suspected them of holding ammunition and guns for Pancho Villa's army. On some fucking bullshit. And and they had no evidence. Actually, they walked away and never found anything. They didn't find any guns. They didn't find any ammunition. They didn't find anything they were looking for. Just slaughtered 15 boys and adults for no reason. Um, then there was the year before that, the 1917 bath riots. This one's a crazy story. I don't know if you guys know this, but this was started. The bath riots were started by Carmelita Torres. And you could say she's kind of like the Mexican Rosa Parks. All right. So there was also a bracero program running through the 1917. All right. And when Mexican workers were crossing over the border, they would have to take kerosene baths and get, sometimes it would be sprayed with Zyklon B. Now, this is crazy shit. All right, kerosene baths and 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 getting sprayed with Zyklon B. This is before Hitler. All right, and Carmelita Torres, she was young at the time, but she wasn't stupid, and the women had to, both the men and the women had to strip down naked and provide their clothes, so their clothes could be desanitized and then could be sanitized and then give it back to them, right? During that time, they're standing there naked, and men would take photos of the women. American men were being disgusting, making rude comments, and you know what? Carmelita Torres did not want to take her clothes off. This time she had enough and she said, fuck it. And everybody stood with her. And there was a riot that lasted a couple days. Interesting story. I suggest you guys look back at that. But I'm just going through, the last 20 years. I'm not even pointing out every single little thing that happened in every state to Mexican Americans. But this just kind of gives you an idea of what a young, quirky, Rodolfo Corky Gonzales is dealing with coming out of high school. He's coming out of high school, and this is the world that he's in. That's what happened the last 20 years in the United States, um, specifically with Mexican Americans. Right now, this next part is going to be his boxing career. After high school, Corky did try to go to college, but due to finances, he had to drop out a semester in. But 1944, it seems like this is when he started training at a boxing gym. The Epworth Boxing Club in Denver is where, as far as the Colorado Encyclopedia is saying, this is where he started training boxing. I don't know officially if this was the first time he put on boxing gloves. He could have been in youth tournaments, but they don't mention that. And according to this is when he starts boxing. His amateur career is starts immediately after this. He was able to win the Diamond and Golden Gloves tournaments. He won the Colorado Regional Amateur Flyweight Championships and the National Amateur Athletic Union Bantamweight Championships in 1946 and 1947. Um, he ended up having a amateur record of 53-4 according to the Colorado Sports Hall of Fame. He turned pro at 19 in 1947. All right, he was a slender guy, 5'8", featherweight, right? But a very good boxer, and was a notable amateur, right? Now, I'm going to give you guys kind of a perspective of the of this era, 1940s, 1950s era, right? Remember, we were talking about World War II. Well, by now, World War II has ended because it ended in 1945. But in the 1950s, that's when you have the Korean War start. But post World War II, boxing was actually experiencing a boom. All right, around this time, you had Gillette Cavalcade of Sports.
Gillette Cavalcade of Sports is on the air.
TV program, which was sponsoring sports, different types of sports, baseball, football, tennis, and of course, boxing. Boxing was one of its most popular sports that it showcased. They actually had Gillette Friday Night Fights, which was extremely popular on NBC. Originally, this was all on the radio. And with, television going into more homes, more people were actually falling in love with boxing. Uh, Now, this is a golden era of boxing, right? But like I said, televisions are just starting to go into people's homes. You do have a program called Gillette Friday Night Fights. But still, around this time, between 1940s and 1950s, it's a golden era of boxing, but there's not that much footage of these legends that existed around this time. There's very limited footage. Um, some of the legends around this time is Sugar Ray Robinson, Rocky Marciano, Willie Pep, Ezra Charles, Joe Louis, Jersey Joe Walcott, Joe Maxim, Archie Moore, Kid Galvin, Yoshio Shirai. I want to name him because he was the first Japanese world champion, flyweight, 1950s, right? Um, so this was a great time in boxing. It's just unfortunate to that I can't get that much footage, and then also um, some of the accolades I need they have to be confirmed uh, by Ring Magazine. And in order for me to do that, I would need to be able to pull up the articles from 1943. And even though do want to start collecting old Ring Magazine articles, I wasn't going to start doing this before I uploaded the video. So I don't have a clipping of what I've been reading on Wikipedia and Encyclopedia Britannica was that he was ranked, highly ranked by Ring Magazine, potentially top five, top three. And, I want to I want to make that disclaimer that, this is the one thing that I really wanted to find. But I, I'm saying that to say I kind of wish that Ring Magazine would, I don't know, put all of their old magazines into an archive, and I would pay a subscription to be able to digitally read through old magazines. You know what I mean? Um, but that's a different thing. Anyways, another thing that I saw a difference in was his record. BoxRec had him at 61 wins, 11 losses, and one draw. Okay, 11 of those wins by KO and four of those losses by KO. Colorado Encyclopedia, though, had him at 65 wins with nine losses and one draw. So a slight difference. Um, Now, as a reminder, he fought at featherweight. He was 5'8". 4 years into his professional career, he faced Willie Pep and lost. Now, Willie Pep is a freaking legend. Okay, for those of you who don't know who Willie Pep is, this guy retired with 229 wins, 11 losses, and one draw. 65 of those wins are by KO, and six of those losses are by KO. He had a fucking legendary record, right? Unfortunately, Corky was not able to beat him. He lost in a decision fight. But this is interesting, though. I wanted to find more information about the guys that he fought. He fought a guy named Jackie Graves. Okay. And for those of you who know about Willie Pep, I'm sure you've heard of that infamous round where Willie Pep was able to win the round on the judge's scorecard without throwing a punch, right? And it turns out that Jackie Graves, a guy that Corky fought and beat by TKO, is actually that guy that lost to Willie Pep. He's the guy that lost that round where Willie Pep didn't throw a punch. I thought that was interesting. He also fought Dave Gallardo, who was a top contender between 1952 and 1954, ranked number three featherweight by Ring Magazine. You also had Miguel Acevedo, a Cuban national champion. He was world rated between 1948 and 1949. So he fought through a very dense. I would say this is probably one of the most talented eras, right? In 1950s. But unfortunately, like I said, because of the era, not too many fights were being filmed. So a lot of the content, if you want to know, you're going to have to read about it in newspaper clippings where they report on the fight. I would love to be able to just run through highlights and show you guys, all this footage about, of Corky, but I can't. In 1953, he lost to Federico Plummer, and that probably should have been the year that he retired. But he didn't. He came back and he fought in 1955 to beat Paul Smith. Paul Smith should not have been in there with him. That was his officially Corky's last fight. All right. Now, Now we're gonna go into his life after boxing. Right, the year he turned pro is actually the year he started his political career. In 1947, that's when he started campaigning for the mayor of Denver, Quig Newton. In 1949, he got married to Geraldine Romero, had 8 children. All right. Now, 1943, by then he's had some success in boxing and he opened up Corky's Corner, which is said to be the first sports bar in Denver, Colorado. Then he sold the sports bar and opened a bail bonds company. He worked with his company and also worked as a bondsman for a while. He became a coordinator for Kennedy in the 60s. There was a huge campaign called Viva Kennedy campaign where they were trying to get Hispanic voters, Latino voters, whatever you want to call it, but mostly Mexican American voters. That's what they wanted. And at this time, the Mexicans supported Kennedy because at the 1960 Democratic Convention, he endorsed school desegregation, fair housing, civil rights, and voting rights. And that really affected the way Mexican Americans were looking at their potential, voting power. This is something that Corky was starting to. He was actually, since he started working campaigning for the mayor of Denver ever since 1947, he was pushing for the Mexican community in that area to be more involved in their politics and was letting them understand about their voting power and how if they all voted for the same thing and they had the same agenda that they might be able to get things done. So he saw some hope in the Democratic Party at this time. um the it really changed the way the Democratic Party viewed the Mexican American voter. Essentially, from here on out, it changed everything. He ran for several. He tried running for political office. You know, Denver City Council, Colorado State Legislature. I always fuck up that word. State senator and mayor of Denver. He failed in all these attempts. And I think that that's kind of what pushed him into activism, was when he felt that he wasn't going to get the support he he should have had while he was running for these positions. He felt like maybe he might be able to make a bigger difference as an activist. All right. So in 1965, the mayor of Denver appointed Corky director of the local chapter of the neighborhood youth corps. All right, this was a place where it was like kind of like the YMCA. They offered job training for underprivileged youth. And this was a short run of him being the director of this chapter. A year into it, a newspaper published articles speaking negative remarks against Corky and racist statements against Mexicans. So he organized a protest and was coincidentally he was fired after that. But I think that's where he found his niche. That's where he was rebellious. You know, he wasn't the type of guy to just take a beating on his back and turn the other cheek. He learned how to hit and not get hit. And in 1966 he founded the Crusade for Justice. Okay, and this group was an early Chicano movement group. The concept was brought from fishermen meetings, and this is fishermen meetings were essentially places where young Mexican Americans would meet and they would discuss pretty much everything, from music to culture to politics, religion, pretty much everything. And out of these conversations came the concept and the idea of the Crusade for Justice, and it was fairly successful. Fairly successful. He was able to create a school. He had workshops. The name of the school was Tate Loco, which is Nawa for a place on a hill. This is actually a name of a place in Mexico City, And the Crusade for Justice didn't just make a school and things for his community. He also worked with Martin Luther King. The Crusade for Justice was part of the Poor Man's March. And this was actually a really huge movement that would have gone further if Martin Luther King was not assassinated. This brought together so many organizations that probably would not have spoken to each other because they were all focused on their own agenda. But Martin Luther King was like, hey, let's cut the bullshit. We're all poor. Let's all work together. And he successfully got them together for the Poor Man's March, which the Chicano movement was proudly a part of. Um, Now, the Crusade for Justice has also a dark history. And this is where it gets interesting. In 1970, there was the Denver school bus bombings. All right. This was a bombing that took out a fleet of school buses. The New York Times reported that 3 white men were seen running from the area. All right. 24 buses and 12 dynamite bombs were set off. The fire chief, Daniel Cronin, he said, in my opinion, it was a strictly professional job. So a lot of people were thinking that this probably was instigated by white, citizens in the area that were in disagreement of the buses being used to integrate schools. So they took it that far and blew up the school buses. Luckily, there was nobody in the school buses, but still, they sent a very violent message. Um, there was also um, the Six of Boulder, also known as Los Seis de Boulder. There were 2 car bombings that happened, I think, if I'm not mistaken, within 24 hours of each other, 48 hours of each other. 2 car bombings that killed 6 activists. Okay. They were young college students, they were activists, and the police and the FBI were, I guess, watching the Crusade for Justice as a group and an organization. And, there's a large portion that believe that this was FBI, killing the young activists. These were traps that were set, while at the same time, the FBI is trying to say that these activists were planning on planting the bombs somewhere else, but unfortunately, they mistakenly set them off while they were in it. And the logic is, sure, maybe an accident can happen to one of the cars, but for it to happen to both of them, two actives all of a sudden, they have bombs in their car, it doesn't make sense. So there's a lot of doubts and a lot of questions in that situation. It depends on who you believe. Do you believe the FBI or do you believe the activists? But that's something interesting that if I would have continued falling into that rabbit hole, I would have never recorded this video. Um, Now, there was also the apartment shootout and explosion. This one's crazy. All right. There was a situation where Luis Martinez Jr., 20 years old, a choreographer, he used to do choreography for um, the Crusades Ballet Chicano dance group. Okay. He was killed by police officers. 6 other people were shot. Some of them were police officers. Some of them were residents of this apartment complex. Tenants and police got into a shootout. This is crazy. Apparently, sniper fire continued on until 3 a.m. in the morning. There was so much back and forth. The shootout was so crazy that they had 60 police officers versus the apartment complex. And I guess something went off. Either they shot ammunition, they shot weapons, they shot at a gas tank or something, but a huge portion of the apartment complex just exploded. And they arrested pretty much everybody they could. Um, and that was just one of the many examples of altercations between his organization and the Denver police and the FBI. Um, Around this time, if you were an activist or part of an activist group, the FBI was keeping a close eye on you. In 1969, this is where he held the Chicano Youth Liberation Conference, and this is where he introduced the spiritual plan of Aslan, or El Plan Espiritual de Aslan. All right. For those of you who don't know, Aslan is it's the mythical name of where the Mexican people come from, or Mexican people, right? Mexica are the Aztec, and the Aztecs' birthplace is called Aztlan, according to Aztec mythology. And what this is pretty much, in my opinion, I don't take it as literal, but what he is saying is that we do have a spiritual, um, an ancestral connection to the land, right? And the one thing with the whole theory of Aslan is that some people believe that Aslan is actually located in the southwestern United States, right? And that's where the Aztec people came from originally before creating the Aztec Empire, right? But regardless, the point of the Spiritual of Aslan, it wasn't really to talk about that. It was really to focus on having a sense of independence within the Mexican American community in the United States, and to cultivate your own culture. Uh, You want to be able to control at least something in your community, and the one thing that you could control was culture, and he took a lot of pride in that. He was also a poet. He wrote "Yo Soy Joaquin," which is a very it's an interesting poem. It's a very interesting poem. It's a long poem, and if you do decide to read it, there's two ways to read it. You can just read it for face value and enjoy it. It's very it's very passionate and very entertaining. Or you can use it as a codex. You could actually take any name, any word that you don't understand, and Google it. Look it up. What's interesting is there's about 1,000 years of Mexican history written into that poem. It's a 15-page poem. It is a long poem, um, but still, you could use that almost as a guide. It's not like the history is written in any particular order, but it gives you clues into, what Corky was thinking when he was writing it. The whole concept of Yo Soy Joaquin is to explain what it is to be a Mexican American. And in his words, which I mean, I think it's a beautiful poem, but just to start off, this is I'm not really much into poetry, but this is the first section, I guess you would call this, of the poem, where he says, Yo soy Joaquin, perdido en un mundo de confusión. I am Joaquin, lost in a world of confusion, caught up in a whirl of gringo society, confused by the rules, scorned by attitudes, suppressed by manipulation, and destroyed by modern society. So, I mean, like right off the bat, he's kind of letting you know this is kind of be a gloomy perspective of what it is to be Mexican American. But then again, when you consider what, you know, what type of history Mexican Americans have, because I went over that in the beginning of the video. You could see why he's not really optimistic. You know what I mean about what it's like to be Mexican American in the United States. Um, and an example of what you could do, like for example, Joaquin Murrieta is a name that's mentioned in the poem, right? And the name of the poem is Yo soy Joaquin. I am Joaquin, right? So the question would be who's Joaquin Murrieta? He has an interesting story. He also has a story where 1850s he was part of the California Gold Rush. Apparently, according to the story that is pushed around, is that his brother was hung, his wife was raped, and he was whipped, all because they said that he had stolen a horse or a mule or whatever, right? Anyways, after that, he was seeking revenge and ended up killing the people that killed his brother and the people that raped his wife, and he started a gang. Um, Dude, I'm telling you, if you go through anything in here, you're going to find in if you're into history, go through the poem and even if you're not reading it, and you're gonna learn a lot. I use this as a tool whenever I just want to go into a binge and learn about history. I could just easily go to this poem and be like, hey, you know what? I'm gonna find out about um, El Grito de Dolores. Let me Google that. What does that mean? You know what I mean? Or what does mestizo mean? Um, what is let's see here. What is Cuauhtemoc? What is that? You know what I mean? Go through it. Read it. I think it's interesting. And you know what? Growing up, I wish I had this information because when I was learning about the civil rights movement in school, it felt like Mexican Americans were not a part of that. It felt like we were almost not even existing in the United States. Like, I mean, 90% of what I mentioned in this video, I didn't learn until after high school. You know, um, it's something that I think it's lacking from our education system. But hopefully, you guys learned something new. Rodolfo Gonzales is, in my opinion, a very interesting character, and he is ahead of his time. He had a lot of great ideas. He tried and failed many times, but he kept getting back up. Um, and I think that he's just an example of, what it's like to fight against the odds. Everything's pushing against you, and at the end of the day, you end up with a crazy resume: professional boxer, business owner, political activist, ran for office. He lived a full life, 8 children, wife. I mean, what else could you ask for? um but yeah, that's the end of the video. I'm hoping you guys enjoyed the story, enjoyed the video. If you like this kind of content, like I said, let me know. Leave a comment. Let me know if there's anybody else you want me to break down. This is Aztec 101 in the ring, and I'm out.